At Ventum Financial, we believe that sharing another person's story is a privilege. The people inspiring and activating others, role modeling what's possible, solving problems today, and building for a better tomorrow. Who is relevant is subjective, but what if we turn the dial? Leaning into the courageous leaders who quietly drive positive change. This is ReleVant, where leaders, creators, and change makers share the ideas shaping business, culture, and the world, one conversation at a time. In this episode, I sat down with Cari Covent, an accomplished cultural and digital transformation leader and advisor. Carrie helps organizations adopt AI and understand it, bridging the gap between innovation and human impact. Speaking with Carrie challenged me to think about how central humans remain in the age of AI, debunking the myth that they will become obsolete. This conversation really reminded me that staying relevant isn't about keeping up with technology. It's about keeping humanity at the center of it. Here's my conversation with Cari Covent. This is ReleVant, where people are discovered. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to Ventum Financial's ReleVants. Today, I'm meeting with Cari Covent of 2Cs.ai. Welcome, Carrie.
Oh, thank you.
Glad to have you on the show. So I have 1,000 questions for you. I've been thinking about, we all talk about AI every day now. And admittedly, I was up in the night thinking about all the possibilities that we could discuss. So I imagine if I'm naturally this curious about AI, you must be everybody's favorite guest at the dinner parties now, because it's what everybody wants to know about.
It seems that, yes, at every dinner party and in every interaction, including, with my parents, with aunts, uncles, family, everyone is asking about AI because it's here, it's now, it's accessible, and everyone is using it in such different ways.
So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing then in the trends and ways that people are using it, ways that it's successful for them.
So on a personal level, I think it would vary. And so, I think obviously people are using it to augment what they do every day, use it as their own personal assistant, use it to get information on, you can use it to get information on healthcare. You can use it to get information on stock advice. Having said that, you always have to validate the sources.
Of course.
But in business, I think what we're seeing is initially there was a focus on using AI for productivity. Mm-hmm. And that continues to be a really important element, but it's also now being used to improve services. And so sometimes as a consumer, you might see how it's being used. And in other times, it might not necessarily be obvious to you that AI is being used underneath the covers.
So I'm curious about that. And I want to know more, particularly because you differentiate between service and we may not even be aware that we're using it. So in your history, you've had a huge impact, digital transformation at one of Canada's largest retailers. How did you integrate it?
We integrated it in a variety of different ways. So the thing with AI is it always needs to start with what problem are you trying to solve? So what you never want to do is you never want to start with, let's use AI for AI's sake. Just like you wouldn't say, let's use a technology before you understand how you might use that technology.
Right.
And so in my experience in working at a large retailer as well as at a variety of different organizations recently, it really starts with what's the problem that you want to solve? Why do you want to solve it? What will you achieve if you do solve it? And then once you've understood that and you've understood the metrics by which you will measure the success if you are able to achieve it, then and only then can you start to think about, okay, well, how might AI be an enabler to solve this problem? And what I will say is AI is not the silver bullet. It should not be used for everything because there's a cost associated with it.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Carrie, what you're saying is that when we integrate AI into our systems, it really needs to be a conversation about strategy. You're talking about the 5 W's and an H, about what are we trying to accomplish rather than just a simple adoption. AI is here, we need it, everybody else has got it. Haven't particularly thought it through.
Absolutely. The strategy element, taking the time up front to understand the design, not the design of the AI, but the design of how you might solve that problem. And what we're finding to be really successful is taking a problem and then breaking it out into discrete components so that you really understand the elements of that problem and where those bottlenecks are as it relates to both efficiency and effectiveness and your ability to solve for those problems and grow your business.
So can you give me an example of that sort of segmentation that you're speaking of? Like, what would you compartmentalize to
Sure.
for?
Absolutely. So if you look at a macro process, so for example, let's take a retail example.
Okay.
Let's take purchasing inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So you're purchasing, a retailer might purchase inventory. First, it starts with the merchandising. What inventory do I need? Then it goes and it purchases it. Then from there, it will ship the inventory to the country of destination. And then from there, it will transport that inventory to distribution centers. Once it's in the distribution centers, it will determine how to allocate that inventory to a variety of different stores. Mm-hmm. Once it's doing that, it's where do I allocate within the store the specific product, and then what customers are going to be buying it, and then move on to the customer experience. So if you think of that journey.
So it was a logistics change, a chain that it solved, and then a product placement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I would say that's a high level macro process. If you look at the discrete components, so even those large tasks or milestones that I just described, what we're finding useful is you look at each milestone and you think about, okay, how might I reimagine that process of the future? So for example, do I need to merchandise in the same way that I've always merchandised? Do I need to transport the product in the same way that I've always transported? And so you start to reimagine it. And then once you've done that, you want to be able to figure out exactly what pieces could be automated, what pieces need to 100% be done by humans within the loop, and then what pieces are both. What is the augmentation and sort of that coming together of the human and the AI to achieve the outcomes that you're trying to achieve?
I joined Ventum because I was looking for a firm that was independent, entrepreneurial, and allowed you to be your very best self at work.
I was with them previously and came back because it felt like a family to me. And I haven't been able to replicate that culture really anywhere else.
It's been amazing energy so far and great camaraderie amongst our team.
And there's a real sense of teamwork, which in turn creates a highly collaborative and intellectually stimulating work environment.
I'm excited about working in an organization that has a commitment to a service culture enabled by empowering people, continuous improvement, and process reengineering.
Ventum is a leading independent company with an exciting future. We have a very strong platform.
Someone would like to join Ventum because of the firm's commitment to enhancing not only the experience of their employees, but also the experience of their clients.
We distinctly and passionately believe that if we give our investment advisors, our frontline capital markets professionals, the tools and the resources that they need, that they will take care of our mutual end client.
Turning up for people, this is Bantam. So that is a great example of a retail. Now, how frequently are other businesses, they must be to you all the time, about help me with my business, Carrie. Where do I integrate AI? Where does it belong? And how much does it cost? And if you can give me some insight, what does the integration phase look like? Like, how long are those sort of experiences?
Okay, so I'm actually going to start with the example, and then I'll work backwards to your third question. So in terms of an example, if you think about how a customer might interact with a specific service provider, for example, or any sort of service provider, whether that's a retailer, whether it's a consulting firm, whether that's an accounting firm, whether that's the government, whatever that might be. The opportunity to integrate AI into that workflow is really a few things. One is from a data perspective. With the data that these organizations have had the opportunity to collect over many years, they now understand their customers in ways that they never could have understood before.
So frame that for me. How do they know their clients better or their customers?
So the way that they know their customers is they've been collecting. So let's think of a omni-channel.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about omni-channel retailer. I'm talking about omni-channel in general.
And for my audience, omni-channel is?
Omni-channel is a variety of different channels in which a business might interact with a customer. So for example, if you're a financial institution and you are interacting with your customers via the web, via potentially a mobile app, a call center, email, mail, direct mail, like there's a variety of different ways. So through all of that, you are collecting information on your customer. You're collecting an understanding of your customer's preferences. So you get to know what they like, what they don't like, what they respond to better. So that's number one. Number two, you're also understanding what are, based on those preferences and based on how you interact with your customers, what's working? What does success look like? How are you converting, for example, your customers from searching, from looking at all of your different services to actually purchasing or engaging with your organization real time? So that's the data that has been collected in many businesses now for a number of years. You now have all of that data. First party data is a significant asset to any business. And so you now have all of that data presumably stored, and it might be stored in a number of different ways. It might be in spreadsheets. It might be in a database. It might be in an Access file. It could be in anything. It could be unstructured data where you're just collecting conversations, for example, with a customer in a call center.
Yep.
So you have all of this data. Now you take that data, you put AI on top of it, and AI has the power to be able to, based on the prompts that you provide or based on the instructions that you provide or the questions that you provide it with, you now have the opportunity to leverage that AI to dig deeper into that data than we've ever been able to dig before. And out of that becomes insights and then action, so that you can actually do something with those insights to achieve the goals that your business wants to achieve. So whether that's, growing their service base or growing their loyalty or whatever that might be, you now have the data, you have the AI to be able to communicate with them differently. And what's changed, I think, in the last few years since generative AI, we had that opportunity before in more traditional AI, and you would have heard of algorithms or machine learning. So that kind of AI was always there to be able to make those predictions based on that data. But now the beauty is you have the opportunity to use the output of that in a way that your consumers or your customers can actually consume it. Your employees can use it in a way that they're comfortable consuming it using natural language. And so it's completely changed the playing field.
And when it changes the playing field, if an organization such as ours, we tend to do planning within 1 year, 3 year, 5, 10. Do we accelerate because we are able to accomplish our goals faster in some components where we're getting insights, as long as there's also good data coming in, that there's good data coming out that's useful? Do you imagine that companies will be able to, say, accelerate what was a 10-year goal? Could it get down to a 5 or a 3?
That would be the goal. So the idea is you do more with the same. So if you had goals that were based on a 3-year time frame, and you have a finite amount of capital that you want to spend on that, and you have resources that are allocated to that, the objective would be that now you can actually keep that same capital, keep those same resources, but your output is significantly more. And that's something that you'll hear in the news right now, where Canada is talking about GDP and productivity and how we're lagging behind as a country. And so AI becomes the lever to be able to improve that productivity, improve that output per human within businesses if it's adopted at scale and responsibly.
Well, you and I were speaking about that actually before we started to film today. Of my use with AI has been unbelievable for how helpful it is for time efficiency. So the amount of content and the amount of writing I need to do, AI now knows my style, and I am able to put out articles or speeches in ways that, first of all, aren't brain exhausting. Those type of tasks are necessary, and they are my tasks. It's not removing somebody from our organization. But to have that kind of creative thought, for me, is a bit of an exhausting process. And now it has provided brain space for me to actually do the things that I find to be my harder work. Yeah, so I could say day to day, I'm already seeing that change.
And I think what we're seeing in organizations and the step change now is, how do you take that time, for example, that you've saved yourself, and that presumably if you've provided tools to your employees that they can now save their time, what are they now doing with that time? And in some cases, so you're a seasoned leader, you can figure that out. In other cases, where you might have more junior employees, it's not as easy. And so being able to be really thoughtful about what the jobs are of the future and what you can now, if you've saved yourself, for example, I don't know, 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day, then what now can you do with that time? What are you doing differently to be able to take advantage of that time? But then thinking through your organization, and if that was to be applied to every employee in your organization, what now can they be doing? And it's a really exciting time because you're thinking about, these are jobs, in many cases, that you always wanted people to be able to do, and they never could get to it.
Or they procrastinated because it's difficult and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But if you have this, then they'll power through it.
Exactly.
So are you suggesting that career guidance or mentoring starts to shift because perhaps there's pockets of day that will be more open at a junior level, and we need to be sure that we're leaning in and pulling them up through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the junior level is one of the levels that is most impacted right now by AI. You'll read it in the news. There's a couple of things to consider on that. One is their roles, the junior people that came in, traditionally 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, they came in, they had in many cases, they had a prescribed list of tasks that they needed to do. They went through it, they did it, they learned from those around them. They sort of moved along in their, corporate journey. Yeah. And they achieved their own personal objectives as well as contributing to the company's objectives. What's happening now is the entry level by which junior new grads, for example, are coming in.
Yep.
Those skills, in many cases, can be augmented significantly by AI. So it's leaving a gap in terms of, well, now what? What do those new employees, or what does that new workforce need to look like? And what we're seeing, and I actually think it's so exciting, is we're seeing that now those new employees can come in, and rather than doing those specific jobs, we can now train them to move, to almost jump. It's almost like a step leap. And they become the manager of tasks.
Right.
And those tasks are necessarily, the tasks are done by them in some cases, but the tasks are also done by the AI. And so there is a massive paradigm shift at that level where you've got people that are, let's say 24 years old, just embarking on their career, and they're now coming in to manage tasks of AI agents, as well as determining what is the work that they still need to do. And what's really important is that they're coming in with the skill set and the brain power, the critical thinking, the curiosity to really understand how to differentiate that and how to manage it through to completion of a total task.
So it'd be interesting to see then, if that's what you're saying, the grads are experienced, whether the MBA programs or even the universities, they need to bring in that module of what that project management looks like with AI integration so that they arrive ready with the skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke at a conference 2 weeks ago at Queen's Smith School of Business for their Master Management and Analytics program. And what I was talking about to them was the technical skills are still important, but the soft skills, building relationships, applying judgment, critical thinking, those are skills that have never been more important now in this sort of intelligence era. And it's an intelligence era because your intelligence is being augmented by something that's artificial. And so how do you as a human being rise above that and contribute to society, contribute to the organization that you work for or the organization that you founded in a very meaningful way?
So, Carrie, we moved to a little bit more of a traditional environment. You and I were talking about libraries and the applicability of AI in that space. So could you share that with our audience?
Absolutely. And I think a library is a perfect example because it's something that we can all relate to. We've all been to libraries multiple times and they continue to be part of our society. And they continue to be part of a place where people go to collect information. But I think what's changing and what is being transformed in some libraries, not everywhere, Finland's a great example of a economy and a sort of civil society that has changed and transformed their library system. But people are going now to not just get the information, but to ask the big questions. And so if you can think about what would a library of the future look like? So rather than you go in and walk through the aisles of books and look at all of them, what if it was similar to a AI-powered retailer where you walk in and you have a QR code and that QR code knows all of the books and all of the information that you've been seeking to understand. And you can scan that QR code as you walk in. And all of a sudden you have this curated, amazing breadth of information that's available to you. And you can use the AI on your phone to ask questions of it as you're seeking out these amazing books. And then when you sit down, wouldn't it be great if the AI could tell you that there's other individuals in the library, perhaps they're at different tables, that are looking at things the same way that you are, or that might be interesting to talk to or collaborate with. And all of a sudden you can go into a community room. And so I think the reason I like a library as an example is it's changing how people not just seek information for themselves, but how they collaborate in a community. And that is very different. If you recall, probably back in the day when we used to go to libraries, you had to be really quiet. No one was allowed to talk. Now it's a place where you can talk to people and you can explore and you can ask those big questions. And back to my previous point about being curious and being critical in your thinking, this now becomes a place where with all of this information that's available to you and the curation of it, that's enabled by the data that you've provided through AI is now bringing it to the next level.
So in this dynamic, which sounds like the golden key to all world's answers, is there risk around algorithm and skewing?
Absolutely. So the risks are plentiful. We've seen a lot of use of AI for bad. And so how you mitigate that, and I think the mitigation has to happen while you're using it for your personal needs. Businesses have to mitigate for it. Governments have to mitigate for it. But there's a few key things to consider as people and organizations are really deploying this at scale. And the first thing is data privacy. So our data, I had said earlier that first-party data is such a critical asset to organizations. The protection of that data is number one. And so privacy is really important. I would say the second thing that's really important is explainability and the removal of bias. So we know that in many cases, AI has bias that's built into it. Often the bias comes from the humans that are developing and building the bias. And so you have to have mechanisms to be able to detect that bias and fix it, mitigate for that. The third element that is really important is transparency. So people need to understand when, especially if you're a business owner or you're running a business, when you're using AI. And in some cases, you need to ask for consent that, can I use your data for AI purposes? But in other cases, what's really important in order to scale adoption, if you can tell people, we're using AI to provide this recommendation, and if they like it, they're more likely to continue to want more of that. And that becomes a really important element of, back to the productivity discussion that we had earlier, of driving productivity within a business and across the country.
We can walk this road till our days grow old. In this life we've built together, and we just begun. The best is still yet to come.
Better health is a lifelong journey. Choose the right healthcare partner. MedCan.
So in the field of AI, where are you seeing the most adoption and trends?
I would say that we are seeing the most adoption would be in manufacturing. So specific to robotics is really where you're seeing it in large distribution centers. We're seeing it in financial services. So financial services, although highly regulated industries, have figured out in many cases how to use AI to drive efficiencies within their organization, but also to interact with their customers and really ensure that there's a better customer experience. And then the third area that we're starting to see it, which is really exciting to me, is in energy and climate, and using AI to be able to better predict weather, for example, which has an impact on specific operations, or using it to be able to predict maintenance of wind turbines, for example, that are powering energy grids, or using it to predict maintenance of large utilities where in mining, for example, where you cannot afford for something to break down because you're out in a mine. And so using it to predict when that maintenance might be, or even using it to determine, based on a variety of weather patterns, how best to change the climate within a large industrial building, for example, and to do that dynamically and real time so that you have less impact on the power grid and ultimately ensuring that you're contributing in a positive way to climate change.
So with all the inputs that we are all contributing through our data and searches and knowledge to AI, I imagine it's going through a very rapid progression right now of getting smarter, more predictive. Is there a point that you see it's a tipping point, like it's hit the max, or how far can it evolve? And what generation are we on now? Are we on Gen 5?
That is, it's such a good question. And one analogy that I relate to, especially in the last 2 years, is if you think of a baseball game. We're all watching the World Series right now, right? Blue Jays and Dodgers. We are in inning 1 of a 9-inning game.
Okay.
And that is really important. And why it's important is because AI is in front of us. It's everywhere. People are often overwhelmed by the need to learn about it, the need to integrate it at scale, the need to adopt it. And yet, think about it, we're in inning 1. It's a long game. And so you have to be thoughtful about how and when and why you're deploying AI at this early stage. Because the trajectory, no one really knows. Well, I'm sure some people do, but how it's evolving, generative AI was a surprise relative to the value that it could create, and the general public consumption of it was a surprise to many. Agentic AI has catapulted in terms of its usage and its ability to really transform tasks across organizations. And so this is just going to continue. At some point, they were talking about artificial general intelligence being available by 2030. Now they're saying some might reach it by 2026.
Sure.
So it is evolving so quickly that I don't think anyone can truly predict it. But I think for the business owner or the employee within a business, or someone that is, using it from personal perspective, think about it as this is just the beginning. And I don't believe we're anywhere near the tipping point.
So it's funny because I was having this conversation yesterday actually with my husband, and he was saying, I don't know now, either on social or even just in my feed, what is real and what isn't. And we got in that conversation because I think I was there about 4 days before. And it's funny because it's a turnoff. And I wonder when there may be some sort of turning away from it, or, is it the shiny new toy where people are playing around with it? And does there become sort of a renaissance of the authentic? And remember when we used to create these on our own? Remember when you saw a stunt, you actually had to do it?
Right. Well, okay, I'll give you an example. Remember when we just got access to the internet. And I know in the role that I had, I was working back then, and I remember when I had to log in to the internet I had to go through a green screen that then gave me access to the World Wide Web.
Yes.
And I was restricted in my usage for, 1 hour, 2 hours. And I was working for a large technology company at the time. Okay. So fast forward, you're absolutely right. Remember when. And I think that what we're going to think about maybe in 5 years from now is remember when we were trying to determine how to use AI? Because in 5 years from now, it's going to be part of the fabric of how we work and how we live. And it's going to move that quickly. And as a result of that, it will be, remember when people used to do this? And that was 5 years ago. And now they're doing that.
Yeah. So speaking of remember when, I was really surprised to hear my son, who's in third year university, this year there are no essays. And the reason being by the professors were, we actually can't tell what you've written versus AI. And I also was sharing this with Dave Couson at Ventum, and I worried, are we going to get dumber because all the information is there and that collection of skill building? When you mentioned just the library, I mean, my children wouldn't know how to go research a book or the Dewey Decimal System. I'm sure they don't even know what that means. All of that was tool building and resourcefulness. And there's certainly an argument that the resourcefulness lives within your phone. There is a computer in your hand. It's mind-blowing still. Is there a point for all of us where it's actually not benefiting us from an intellect point of view? Or, as you were perhaps saying earlier, it's actually pushing us towards critical thinking?
So I, of course, am the optimist in all of this. And there is a term called super agency. Reid Hoffman wrote a book called Super Agency with Ethan Mollick. And super agency talks about the elevated agency that humans now have as a result of AI to be able to manage their lives in a way that they were never able to manage before. And so those that rely on how things were done in the past and are stuck in that, they might become dumber. But those that take advantage of this new era of technology-enabled decision-making combined with advanced judgment as a result of so much information that's now available to you, you can be superhuman. You all of a sudden have access to superpowers that as a human we never had access to before. And then the agency comes from, what can you do with that? And so something that a lot of people are talking about in my space is this has never been a better time than now for people to be able to build companies, find companies and build companies, or take in a company that is traditional in its operation and completely transform it. This is a moment where you have agency to be able to do that. And that is not for dumb people. That's for really smart people that are critically thinking about and creatively thinking about how to reimagine what the future could look like.
So if there's something that you would like our audience to take away from today, what would you say in their journey of understanding AI?
I would say that regardless of where you are in the journey, keep learning, be curious, ask questions, ask why every step of the way. Don't trust whatever is put in front of you. Explore it, criticize it, challenge it. But I think from a business perspective, don't wait. Don't wait to see what others are doing, especially in small and medium-sized businesses. Take this moment, reimagine what it could look like, put the people right at the center of it, figure out what are your biggest problems, and then figure out how AI can accelerate solving for those biggest problems and take the humans and heighten them to a whole other level.
Carrie, what was a piece of advice that was given to you or something that you experienced earlier in your career that is still relevant to you today?
Can I say two things?
Of course.
All right. The first one is don't be afraid to take some risks along the way, because we're in the first inning and we don't know all of the answers. You have to be in the mindset where you are taking thoughtful risks along the way. The second thing is build an ecosystem. There has never been more opportunities to leverage partnerships than there is today. There's new businesses that are popping up everywhere. There's startup, there's large players, there's people that have great ideas. Build a partnership ecosystem and collaborate and work together to drive to some common agendas.
I like your optimism. It's so wonderful to hear your perspective on AI because it's so positive. And I think sadly, a little bit in the news, there was a little bit of fear injected to everybody at the beginning, but you're someone who is lifting, open that lid and showing us really what's within. So Carrie, thank you. I have found this to be fascinating, and I am hoping that you are going to build a webinar series for our company.
I would love that. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it.